Okay. All right. Now it's recording. All right. So we're on to chapter 4, resources. So has anybody read ahead? Still trying to catch up? It's understandable if you guys are still trying to catch up. It's a lot of material. And then we have our day jobs and everything else that happens. So, but we're getting close to the end. There's today and 3 more classes, so 4. And then you guys would accomplish the education requirement for the PMP exam. And then it's on you to study as much as you feel you need to take the test. But fill out that experience. You can go to the PMI website and complete it online. And when you submit it, they'll give you the green light. If you get selected for an audit like I did, you have to send them some paperwork, have your supervisor sign off on a couple things. And that's it. So yeah, shouldn't be any problem, the audit. But I can help you guys out if you do have any questions on filling out that form or the online form, and we can get you that authorization to test. But so I can be a resource for you guys playing into chapter 4 here. All right. Probably helps if I click on the right screen. So project resource management. You know, out of the process groups, we're actually in the project. So we're in the planning, execution, and monitoring and controlling phase. And let's see here. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I can't hear myself, so I got to adjust on my, all right. Now I can hear myself. All right. Have you guys ever had that problem where you're like wearing headphones and you can't hear yourself and it just kind of throws you off a little? No? I guess it's just a me problem then. Okay. I can accept that. All right. So we're trying to look at all our resources that are projects. So we're looking at our physical and human resources. And as the project manager, you're going to identify what you need. You're going to acquire it, whatever the proper procedure is to acquire those resources. And then you're going to manage those resources. And hopefully, through your experience and your abilities, you manage your resources well.
Yeah.
You had something, Derek?
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. So they don't list it here, but there should be a release, your release resources, because you're not going to, most resources you're not going to use for the entire project. So there should be a point where you evaluate if you need to release those resources back to wherever they came from. So maybe another project can use them, or, you know, that their home department can use them. You guys did get that email I sent with the PMBOK guide? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Don't distribute that. As you can see, my name is on the bottom of every page. So if you do, they're going to easily find me because it's got my membership number and my name. So, but it's, you know, that saved you some money right there. Version 7, they haven't released yet in a digital form. Otherwise, I'd give you a copy of version 7. But 6 is out there. So, all right. So resource management in the project management professional processes, that, you know, we're going to create a work breakdown structure. So by identifying individual tasks, we can identify the resources that are required for those tasks. And that helps us because we can define our staffing, you know, how many people do we need? What kind of people do we need? When I say what kind, you know, their specialty. Are they marketing? Are they accounting? Are they engineers? You know, that kind of people. Not, you know, green-eyed people eater, like the Chipmunk song. But, you know, that will help us define all this. And then, you know, our activity durations and the cost, depending on the resources you pick, will have an associated cost to them. And depending on how your accounting is, you might have to account for the hours of use of that item, especially if you contract it or you lease it from an outside entity. They're probably charging an hourly rate or a daily rate or a weekly or some other fixed term. And based on your usage, you can identify the cost. So knowing the duration of that activity, and knowing that if you put all the activities next to each other that use that resource, you can get the most bang for your buck, for example. Because like when my refrigerator went out, I went down to Rent-A-Center to get a refrigerator, minimum 2 weeks of rental period. I only needed a week. Now, of course, I didn't want 2 weeks of downtime with my my refrigerator. So, I had to pay 2 weeks, even though I needed a week for it to get repaired. But if I knew that, okay, I got this refrigerator went down, then I had a second refrigerator go down, or the technician came in and needed parts, then I can coordinate that refrigerator to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long I needed it. It ended up being a month to get my refrigerator repaired. Not happy, but I basically got like an entire new refrigerator. They replaced all the refrigerant lines and everything, and even the radiators and stuff. At least I think that's what they call them. Anyway, knowing our activities will determine how long we need our resources. And we can also use this information to let our stakeholders know. There might be some resources that we can't get ourselves, or we're in conflict with another project. So working with our stakeholders, because they have an interest in our project, they can be an advocate for helping us get that resource that we need. For example, let's say we're working for FEMA, and we have this tropical storm coming to Florida. Well, there's going to be some damage from that. Well, one of the major stakeholders of FEMA might be the American Red Cross. So the American Red Cross could help with setting up shelters, disaster shelters, if needed. So, but in order to get those shelters, you might have to work with the Red Cross to figure out, okay, how large do they need to be? Do we need a school gymnasium, or do we just need, empty office space? You can do all of that kind of stuff by talking to your stakeholders. The county might not be able to get you that stuff because now you're talking to private individuals who own that property that you want to use as a shelter. Well, the Red Cross might be able to go at it from a donation aspect because they're a nonprofit charity. So now they can give a charity receipt to that property owner and get that. Now, that's one unique situation, but you guys might be able to think of others within your own job that you might have had to negotiate or get somebody else to help you out, a stakeholder in your own jobs. Can you think of something like that? Maybe. Let's see. Sarah's thinking hard, but you're all right. There, no worries about that. You guys can mull that over time. Quality control can be affected too by your team's capabilities. If you get somebody who's fresh out of college that doesn't have a whole lot of experience in the field that you need in your project, their quality might need to be reviewed, we'll just say. But if you get somebody with 30 years experience in that field, you might not even need to check their work, or you check it just to make sure that to verify their quality. But after that, you might not check it anymore. It all comes down to that. So when you have your team, you might need to take a hard look at it and say, where am I weak at? And if, let's say you did have somebody straight out of college, well, they might be your weak point, or they might be a strong point. So, and you can fill in from there by getting additional resources to fill in those weaknesses. So, yeah. Project planning resources on agile or hybrid projects. So, the mindset, we're trying to give our projects to stable teams. The people know each other. They all work well together. So they're at that performing stage of the team formation process. Remember, storming, norming, performing, all those stages. So the stable teams are probably at the performing stage where they're putting out high quality work at a high velocity. And you want to have self-organizing, self-managing teams. I mean, as a project manager, you don't want to micromanage unless that's the kind of person you are. I hope not. It's a lot of work to manage a lot of teams. And some teams don't have a defined leader. So there's no central control. You might have to pick somebody to say, hey, you're the team leader. I'm going to use you as my point of contact to the team. And that might work. So when you're also in Agile, don't remove resources during an iteration. Wait till the end of an iteration, because you don't know if they just like put that resource on the shelf, so to say, and they're going to come back to get it a little bit later. You don't want to release it and then have to go back asking for it again. So in Agile, the project manager is a servant leader. Now, they're working for the team. So they're the leader. They're ultimately responsible, but you're helping them do the best they can. Your general specialists, can help fill in, in certain areas where it might just need some general work, some lower level work. Like if you ask me to do something I'm not an expert in, I might be considered a generalist in that area, but when it comes to something else, I might be the subject matter expert. So I can fill in to help reduce a constraint, but I'm by no means somebody that should be considered for that area, maybe. So like I know purchasing, but if you ask me to do transportation logistics in supply chain, that's not me. I can buy it, I can contract, I can do all that kind of stuff, but I'm not the person who's going to coordinate the shipping of it. As far as I go, I just call some transportation company and say, this is what I got, how much is it going to cost? That's my part of it. But there's actual experts in transportation and logistics that are better suited for that kind of work. And your team members are going to adapt, and hopefully they embrace feedback, constructive feedback, useful feedback. We don't always get that from our supervisors or bosses or managers, but if we ask for it, hopefully we receive it, and that we give good feedback to our people as well. Agile, it has to be a collaborative team environment. The stakeholders are involved, you're involved, the team members are involved, your project owner or the product owners involved. That way you're more productive and you're more innovative problem solving, because people are bringing their experiences. They might have a different way of thinking. Like for example, I was in the military. Our first option was to blow it up, but do we really need to blow it up? No, there's other options, but that's kind of like a one mindset thing. But if we had other people, like an engineer, they might say, well, just turn off the power or whatever, and military mindset would never think of that. Yes.
Sounds like blowing it up is the more fun option though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep. But you guys understand what I mean by that? Yeah. When the team has a success, mention it. Communicate it. Make sure that knowledge is shared if it's a successful, like, new way of doing something. Let's say somebody wants to expand their skills in another area. Well, maybe you can put them in that and kind of give them that little bit of flexibility in their assignments. And if the team knows that you trust them, they're going to reciprocate 90% of the time, 95% of the time. So let them know they're doing a good job, and celebrate their successes. If there's a failure, don't beat them down, but let them know, hey, how could we have done this better? Maybe make it a learning experience. And total expense planning. In Agile, there's probably more when it comes to labor is associated with your project. So you want to make sure that you kind of assume the worst with when you're factoring salaries and contractor costs. So you want to use the maximum values in your planning. And that way, if you do come under, it's great. But if you go over that or over a planned expense, you might have to do some tap dancing to explain it. So, all right. So, resources in Agile is not excessively different than a regular project. It just happens a lot faster. So, that's when I see all this, it just happens faster. So, so now into those 47 process activities, right? So plan resource management. So of course, in order to plan for our resource management or create this plan, we need our project charter. You know, if we're going to be doing repairing a piece of equipment, well, our project charter is going to say that, so we don't need to think of, let's say, getting a backhoe construction equipment. We don't need that because we're just fixing something, or we're redesigning a process for manufacturing. Project management plan, of course, we're going to need several things from that. Our quality management plan, our scope baseline, and then, of course, our project documents need several documents from there. Our project schedule, our requirements, risk register, and stakeholder register. And of course, we have our EEFs, our enterprise and environmental factors, and our OPAs, organizational process assets. Now, like I've been saying before, you may not use all of these under this activity, but these are all the ones that could possibly be for our testing purposes. There may be more depending on your project and your company, but this is what the book wants us to know. Tools and techniques. So you're going to use your expert judgment because you guys are experts in your fields, right? You guys are all supposed to say yes. All right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to assume you're experts because I have no idea about your field. So you guys are experts compared to me. All right. So you're going to need to also have some data representation. So you might have some hierarchical charts, which could be a work breakdown structure. Responsibility assignment matrix. Who's responsible for what? Organizational theory. So what is your organizational culture and how do they do things? And you're probably going to have meetings to figure this out. So once you do use these tools and techniques on your inputs, your outputs are going to be your resource management plan. Also your team charter. So a team charter is different than your project charter. So this is just like a sub charter, but specifically for the team. And you're going to update some project documents. So your assumptions log and your risk register. All right. So I'm sorry if you hear my son crying. He's kind of having an accelerated day today. I should be going to bed soon too. So your organizational breakdown structure, you guys have probably have all seen this before. And if your company uses this kind of thing or has some type of graphical representation of who answers to who, it could be very useful. So you can find out where you are and see who you report to and maybe where your people report to. So when I look at this, it seems like this is using a strong, well, it says a strong matrix organizational structure where you're borrowing people from their departments to work on your project. So you're responsible for your project, but you also answer to your manager or project managers, which answers to the chief executive. And then your staff answer to their own departments also. So your staff have two managers essentially. So it's one way to look at it is when you're looking at your project, because if you are having a problem with one person, you might need to talk to their manager because you're not allowed to handle it, or you might have to go to go to a manager of another department and ask for somebody to work on your project because you need that resource. So having this would be useful. So same thing with a resource breakdown structure. So you have all your, it's basically just a hierarchical chart using the 3 categories of materials, people, and equipment. So you can see under people, there's preclinical, clinical, formulation, facility construction, regulatory affairs, and marketing. So there's 6 type of people, but then under facility construction, it gets a little bit more detailed. So you get all the way down to a lead mechanical engineer, a mechanical specialist, and a mechanical assistant down at the lowest level. So this can be useful to, when you break things down, to know what kind of people you need. I've never done this, but I can see how it could be very useful if I had a complex enough project where I needed to do this. So a new anti-scarring product might be interesting. You guys have questions on this? No? Just keep powering forward? All right, so we're only going to get to the middle of chapter 5, according to the schedule. So at least I picked a spot in chapter 5 to go for. Anyway, resource management plan. So some things you might see in the resource management plan. The roles and responsibility. This is going to might be written in a paragraph form. So the function to be performed, the authority that is there, responsibility, and required competencies. Project organizational charts. You might have so many charts, you might break them down by department, depending on how big the company is. They also could be useful if you're, let's say, have an international team because your company is international and you're doing virtual stuff. It might be useful to know the organizational chart, especially for other places that you're not at. You might not be familiar with who's the manager of what departments at that location. And your project team resource management. So it's usually time phased, like milestone 1, 2, 3, or whatever other designator the project requires. You're going to acquire your staff and how long you're going to keep them and when you're going to release them back to their departments. Resource calendars. This can give you kind of an overview of what resources you have and when they're coming in, when they're leaving, that kind of thing. If there's any training needs for your team because of a resource, like if someone's, I don't know why I'm on a construction kick, but let's say someone operates a bulldozer, they might not know how to use a backhoe or vice versa. So you might need to provide some training, but they might be classified as a heavy equipment operator, but there's many specialties under there. So you might not get the exact specialty you need. Team building and reward strategies. Are you going to have one of those activities with the trust falls and all that other kind of stuff? Or and how are you going to reward people? Are you going to do like on the spot awards by giving people Starbucks gift cards? Are you going to do a monthly award to, certain members of the team? Is there like a bonus at the end? What kind of reward strategies are you guys going to do? So in Agile, you're going to try to estimate your resources because the number of stories you could complete during an iteration changes. The same thing with these The stories might get shifted around depending on the priority of the stakeholder, right? So you might plan to bring in somebody on the third iteration, but what they're doing now is on the fifth iteration because it's been rearranged. So it's hard to estimate these resources, but you can do it. So you have to discuss the required resources for the story and select the best person available for it. Remember, agile and hybrid is fast. Let's say 2 weeks is, let's say, an average iteration. Is the person good enough to perform what's needed to be performed within 2 weeks and complete whatever that story is, or contribute to that story and have it done in 2 weeks? If they're not, you might want to look for another person, so a better person. Just when you do that, look at the experience level that's required for that story so you can get the right person. I mean, somebody straight out of college or straight out of high school is probably not going to be the best person on a complex, high experience needed story. They might be a prodigy, and yeah, your company HR was lucky to get them. So you can also estimate and revise the story points, just like we've talked about. These stories can get shifted around. So you might be doing one story next iteration, but something happened and you kick that story down a couple iterations because the stakeholder, the project owner, wants to focus on something first. And make sure your team is committed to the stories. There should be that why or business case that you're talking about in the beginning. That way everybody has the buy-in. They understand what they're doing, how it's going to help. And and they'll be more invested in that story to get it done. It's flow-based, your resource estimation. So make sure your team commits to release that iteration during that duration. If you have that resource only for 2 weeks, make sure your team commits to finishing everything that needs that resource during that iteration. And ask for help. Recognizing you need help and asking the right people for that help will definitely help. I know it's a lot of helps in one sentence, but there's a lot of people, especially guys, that have too much pride and they don't want to ask for help. But if you can identify when you need help and ask at the right time, you'll have more success. And only you can determine when the right time is. And might be just someone else saying, hey, we're getting behind. And now you can go out and look for that resource that's needed. But the rest of the team might be able to take care of it if you just let them know, hey, this is what's going on. How can we get back on track, or what do we need to do? And you want to track your velocity and your capacity. So, and consider that, your people's vacations or time off or whatever. Maybe one of your people wants to go to their kid's little league game or dance recital or whatever it might be. You might need to adjust based on that. So, and consider your backlog scrubbing too. Did something in your backlog get taken care of because it was needed to be taken care of during another story? So if it did, you can scrub it out and also rearrange what's remaining in your backlog. So something else might be a higher priority or something got kicked to a lower priority. So all this is going to impact our resources, our estimation for resources. So we need to estimate activity resources. So when we did our work breakdown structure, we hopefully went down to the activity level and we defined the activity enough where we can say, this is what we need for that when it comes to the resources. So our activity duration is directly impacted by our resource estimations too. If we don't have all our resources, our activity might be extended, be longer. But if we have all the resources, maybe we can adjust that activity duration shorter. So for inputs, of course, we're always doing something with a project management plan here. Resource management plan, which we've already worked on, and our scope baseline. Our project documents, so we're working on activities, so we're going to do a lot of activity ones. Activity attributes, activity list, assumption log, cost estimates, resource calendars, and our risk register. Our EEFs and OPAs. So our tools and techniques, once again, expert judgment. We can use bottom-up estimating, analogous estimating, or parametric estimating. We can use one of these, one of the three of these. Yeah. Really depends on which one you want to do or are more comfortable with. Data analysis. So there might be some alternatives that you can do. What if type of analysis. We're going to use our project management information system and meetings. Doesn't everybody love meetings? Yeah, I hate them too. I love to hate them. Most of the things can get done by email. And for whatever reason in my office, they love that reply to all function. And especially when the email goes off on a tangent and they're still using the reply to all, it's like, I don't need to know about your favorite vegetables, a carrot or whatever. I don't know. I like carrot cake, but whatever. In our outputs, so resource requirements, we're going to have a list of what we need to use for our activities. The basis for the estimates. So we'll be able to justify why we need certain resources and why we estimated them certain ways. We have that information now. Resource breakdown structure. We've already mentioned that. It's kind of like a work breakdown structure, but it's on our resources. Our project documents. So we're going to update some activity attributes, probably adding in our resources that we've identified that we need there. Our assumption log and our lessons learned register. So resource calendars. So we can use these to identify, when a resource is available, and whether it's our people, equipment, materials, it just helps. Like, in some of your jobs, you might have to schedule meetings. And so scheduling a meeting, I know on my end, I can see my coworkers' calendars, not the full details, but like when they have gaps in their day. So I can schedule a meeting looking at those gaps, and hopefully everybody has time at the same time, so I can schedule a meeting. Kind of the same thing here. We're looking to see when resources are available. You can also see that a resource is being used. If you're looking to add that to another activity, now you might have a conflict of demand on that resource. So when that happens, you need to use your expert judgment and say, how can we, I guess in biblical terms, like split the baby, or, make sure Humpty Dumpty doesn't fall off the wall on either side, whatever is needed to make that happen. And when we're working on our activity durations, we might need to adjust our activities or how long the activities are based on the conflicts we identify in the resources. And we can continue to update our schedule or modify our schedule if we've adjusted activity durations. So, you guys with me so far? All right. Okay. So estimating, estimating is, sometimes just a sophisticated wild guess, but, hopefully we use a more scientific method. So we can look at the, our alternatives, yes, we can have the ideal piece of equipment or ideal resource for this, but there might be a constraint such as it's not available, it costs too much, or we can't get it for long enough, or whatever the constraint might be. Well, what alternatives are to that? So can we use another piece of equipment that does the same job, but maybe not as well? All these different considerations we should look at, the what ifs. What if the first primary resource isn't available? What's the next one in line? What if we can't do it and we have to outsource it? So another resource might be using an outsourcing firm. Bottom-up estimating. So we're looking at the requirements for each work package or activity, and we're rolling that up to see at what point, or all the way up to the top when we're doing our estimating. If we need a tractor trailer for half a day because of this step in the project, well, there might be another activity that needs it that also uses it for half a day, and now we can put those activities at the same time. So, or one right after another because of that. Now we might have to shift those activities forward or backwards because there might be some dependencies that we have to work with. But, this bottom-up estimating, we're not looking at the conflicts right away. We'll look at the conflicts afterwards. And software tools, there might be some information from similar projects in your project management information system. So it doesn't hurt to look. You might have the perfect solution in the computer where before it might never have looked. So you're reinventing the wheel. In project management, if we already have done it or somebody else has done it, I should say, go ahead and plagiarize what they did. Do the same thing. Be the smarter mouse getting the cheese. Somebody already did the hard work. Just, they already put the cheese on the plate. Go ahead and pull up to the plate. So, yeah, use your software that you have. So acquiring resources for agile and hybrid. Hold on, guys. I got to blow my nose real quick. All right. Okay, so we want to take a look to see where our team's at. Can our team do it without needing any outside resources? Or does the team need that resource because they need help? Make sure they are comfortable in asking for help. And if it's beyond their ability, like just flatly beyond their ability, no matter what you give them, you might have to add a person to the team who has that ability or that resource, or you might just need to contract it out. Contract it out to an outsourcing company. So really, those are the three options. Either you can do it, you can sort of do it, or you can't do it, right? But wherever you fall on that will lead you to what you have to do. If your team can do it without adding anything, you're good. The other ones is where you might need to take action. So acquiring resources. So you already have a list of what you need, when you need it, how long you need it, and the estimated costs of all that kind of those resources. So your project management plan is one of your inputs here. The resource management plan, your procurement management plan, and your cost baseline. Your procurement management plan might be just giving this list over to your procurement folks and letting them have at it. Could be that simple, or it can be you have to do it yourself, or you need to bring someone onto your team that can do that for you. Don't always think you need to do it yourself. Delegation is key. You're only one person, so don't try to do it all. Project documents. So you're going to need your project schedule, resource calendars, resource requirements, and your stakeholder register. So you're going to use your EEFs and OPAs also, your tools and techniques. So you're going to need your decision-making ability. So with this, you might use a multi-criteria decision analysis where you put weights on certain things and different factors. And then you make a decision based on the outcome of that. Interpersonal and team skills. You might have to do some negotiation. Hopefully it's not aggressive negotiation, but you might have to beg and borrow and even possibly steal to get resources for your project. I can say that I may or may not have done that third one, but it happens. We have to do what we need to get our project or keep our project going. You can do some pre-assignment, and you can use some virtual teams. So your virtual teams in different locations might have access to different resources that you may not have at your location. So your outputs, you're going to have physical resource assignments. So you're going to be able to tell people this is you're on my team now, or have a reservation for a resource coming up in the future. Project team assignments. So actually this one is your team members being assigned to you. Resource calendar. You might have had to adjust when you get resources based on their availability. Change requests. You might have to change your project based on resource availability, or a resource is just flat out not available. So you might have to adjust your project overall to accommodate that. Project management plan updates. So you might have to update your resource management plan and your cost baseline. Project documents. We're always changing something here. So lessons learned register, our project schedule, our resource breakdown structure, resource requirements, a risk register, stakeholder register, and we might update our enterprise environmental factors or our organizational process assets. Might do some updates there. One thing I would definitely do with this is when you're going through and trying to determine your resources, bring in experts in those areas, because you can't be expected to be an expert in everything. So you might think you need a certain piece of equipment or a certain resource, but if you can get an expert, they might say, oh yeah, that'd be good, but it would be even better if you got this resource. So they don't have to be on your team. You could just consult with them. If you need a mechanical engineer as on your team, have them tell you about what their specialty is. They might say, oh, well, this is a great piece of equipment, but this one's even better. Or we need this type of welder who can weld this kind of weld, where the ones you were thinking of, it can't, wouldn't do for this project, or, stuff like that. All right. So now we need to develop our team. So we've all gone through this, hopefully, where you're putting your team together. Have you guys done this? Yeah. Okay. So we want to take a look at our project management plan, especially that resource management plan. Project documents, so our lessons learned, project schedule, project team assignments, resource calendars, and our team charter, our EEFs and OPAs. So some of the tools that we might do with developing our team, co-location, bringing the team together. If you for example, the Cisco campus in North Carolina, there's about 15 buildings. That's why I call it a campus. You might be able to bring all your team members into a same area instead of being spread out among the 15 buildings they got. So that might be more helpful to your project rather than everybody being in their own office in a different building. However, virtual teams might be the way to go. Communication technology. how are you guys going to communicate? Interpersonal and team skills that you can use: conflict management, influencing, motivation, negotiation, and team building. So you guys are senior enough where you've probably used all those. So recognition and rewards. People like to be recognized for the most part, but everybody likes rewards, whether it's a private reward or a public reward. I mean, it could be something as small as like a $5 Starbucks gift card, or it can be a $500 bonus added to their paycheck. It doesn't even have to be a monetary thing. You could just give them a card for a free lunch at the company cafeteria or something. It doesn't have to be complicated. It could be a reward of a day off. Maybe they needed some day off, and because of the project, you've denied it, but they're doing so well that you remember it, and you're like, okay, go ahead and take that day off. You're really contributing to the team. Training. Some people would prefer training over, let's say, a reward, because they know that training might get them to a supervisor's position or move up in the chain down the road, because they have those skills now. Individual and team assessments. Be nice to know if somebody's a troublemaker or not before they come onto your team. And meetings. Going to have meetings here. So hopefully your outputs, after you use those tools and techniques on your inputs, team performance assessment. How are you going to assess your team's performance? Change requests if needed. Project management plan updates. You're going to update your resource management plan. Your project documents will need to be updated. Lessons learned register, project schedule, project team assignments, resource calendars, team charter. And of course, you might have to update your EEFs and OPAs. All right. So managing agile and hybrid teams. So most teams manage themselves in this, because most of the time they're not screwing around. They're nose to the grindstone because of how fast these projects are. Or you expect a certain amount of work out of them within that iteration. Servant leaders, they usually provide performance data during retrospectives to help with self-management. So this could be just things you notice and say, hey, I noticed you guys were doing this. And then they can be like, oh yeah, we were doing that. Maybe we should stop that. Or, maybe taking too many smoke breaks, or I don't know, playing music too loud in their workspace, whatever it is. And they can take action themselves to correct that. Or you can also mention some good things, and maybe they'll keep those good things going because they're noticed. But you still need to do some management skills here. So you might have to remove a team member who's not, self-motivating. They're unable to manage themselves. So while you're a servant leader, you're going to have to be the manager in this. So hopefully you don't run into that, but odds are you will. Managing the team. Since we talked about managing the people, might have to remove people. We have to figure out how we're going to manage the team. So hopefully we have many skills that we can use to manage, and we can create that high performing team. So here we can use certain inputs and use our management skills really to get to our outputs on our managed team. So our project management team, our plan, needs our resource management plan. Going to use some project documents. Our issue log, that's a new one. So we write down all the problems that we run into here and how we solve them. That's what this issue log is. Our lessons learned register, our project team assignments, our team charter, work performance reports, team performance assessments, and our enterprise environmental factors, and our organizational and process assets. So those are going to be our inputs to essentially our management style, our interpersonal and team skills, conflict management, decision-making, emotional intelligence, influencing, our leadership. So basically just being a manager. And we'll use our project management information system. So outputs, we might have some change requests. We may have some updates to our resource management plan, our schedule baseline, and our cost baseline. So project document updates or issue log, lessons learned register, and our project team assignments. And then our enterprise environmental factors might need to be updated too. So controlling resources on the Agile and hybrid projects. So like I've said, there's a one type of Agile called Scrum. So as a Scrum Master, which is their project manager, ensure that the team has what it needs to succeed. A central meeting space with a Kanban board, co-located workspaces, IT and software, cloud-based systems, whatever they need. These are just some of the things that are needed. So, control resources. So, we've identified that we need the resources. We've acquired the resources. Now we need to control those resources. So project management plan, we have our resource management plan, which is going to define how we really control these. Project documents, our issue log, lessons learned register, physical resource assignment, project schedule, resource breakdown structure, resource management's risk register, work performance data, agreements, and our organizational process assets. So with those inputs, we're going to use these tools and techniques, data analysis. So we are probably going to use the alternative analysis or the what if analysis, cost benefit analysis. We're going to look at the pros and cons, performance reviews, and trend analysis. Use our problem solving skills, our interpersonal and team skills. So negotiating and influencing, and possibly even using the project management information system. And then our outputs. So once we use the tools and techniques on our inputs, we're going to have work performance information, might have some change requests, project management plan updates. So we might have an update to our resource management plan, our schedule baseline, and our cost baseline. So project document updates, we might do something with the assumption log, the issue log, lesson learned register, physical resource assignments, resource breakdown structure, and our risk register. So this control resource is really just focusing on the physical resource, where we've assigned it and who has access for it for their activity. So like who's allocated the usage of it. So we're really looking at that. If it's not a physical resource, it's kind of hard to control that. But it's possible to control that. So resource problems, we're always going to have problems, regardless of our plan or anything like that. We're going to run into some problems. So problems can be internal or external. So if it's a physical resource, we might have some poor storage conditions. That could be, let's say, you don't have enough storage space to lock it up. Someone decides to take something home and use it at home, or they were going to work over the weekend or something. That could be considered a poor storage condition because it's not stored at the office or whatnot. Now, if we look at external, what's external to our company, our supplier goes out of business. Political upheaval. I mean, we've had, what was it, last summer, we had all those riots, protests, whatever you want to call them. It was causing a lot of upheaval. Environmental disaster, you know, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, fires. Well, essentially in the United States, we have all the natural disasters that can possibly happen, that do happen in the United States. So there could be all sorts of external threats to our resources. And that would be it for our chapter 4. And I have 7 o'clock, so we can take a break if you guys want. I know I've been kind of rattling on, but you know, you guys can feel free to ask questions. So, but all right, what, 10 minutes? Sound good? All right, we'll see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, so chapter 5, procurement. You guys ready to kick back off? Okay. All right. Okay. So procurement, you know, so procurement's kind of basic, where there's just two sides really. There's the sellers and the buyers. You know? So your organization, depending on what you're procuring, can be a buyer or a seller. So, you know, sellers are generally called suppliers, vendors, service providers, contractors. But where the buyers are called the clients or the customer or acquiring organization or purchaser. So these words might be used interchangeably. And your company will, depending on what your company does and what your project is, you could be on both sides of this, or, you know, in either role, I should say. So project procurement management. So we're in the middle of the project here, the planning, executing, and monitoring and controlling. So we're right in the middle. However, there's some debate among at PMI about adding it to the closing phase too, because you have to close out your procurements. But it's not on the version 6, so you guys don't need to worry about that. So these processes are basically what you need to acquire goods and services, or they're the results of from something outside of the project team. So essentially, it's the same as resource. You know, the same 3 process groups here. So the middle of the project, if you guys are trying to link these together. So we've identified what resources we need. So this could be used as how we're going to get those resources. And procurement is one way to do it. So we need to plan for it differently on agile and hybrid projects. So we're going to collaborate with our customer over the contract. We're going to negotiate with our customer. So the contract's still needed, but it should be written in a way that will enable the agile process. And depending on your company, and if you have a legal department, they don't like having those open-ended things. So it might be difficult for their legal departments to wrap their head around it. However, you know, you need to have that wiggle room within the contract. So it should emphasize the value that's being delivered and enable you to be flexible with your team. And also, because agile projects can increase in scope or decrease in scope, there should be maybe a clause or something in that contract that allows for that. And lawyers should be able to come up with the correct wording for that. And it should be no problem for you. As a project manager, though, you're probably not going to be involved at this level, at the contract between your company and a customer. So, but you might be at the table just sitting in there and maybe give some input as it goes. Who knows? Maybe you're the one in a few years making these negotiations, being an executive at the company, right? Guys are all going to get to the big offices, corner office with all the windows and on like the 50th floor of a building, right? Oh yeah, you guys can make it. You might have to start your own company to get there, like I might have to, but hey.
Jeremy, I don't know if I'd want that job.
Yeah, there's a lot of stress. That would be a lot of stress.
What I've noticed to be able to get there with some of the people that I've known that have climbed that have become the executive level, they're not somebody that I really would ever trust. You know, I don't know. I just see a lot of people getting those positions because they're throwing others under the bus. That's just not me. That's just what I've seen in my personal life, and I'm just not interested in it. However, though, I've seen a few people. They're quite. They're not egotistical. They're quite nice people, but they're pretty far few that I've noticed.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen it on both sides, like you've mentioned. You know, I've seen the ones that kind of step all over people to climb up the ladder, and then there's others that, you know, they're good leaders, and that's how they got to that position. So, yeah, you're right. You will come across all sorts, and you guys get to choose how you'll get there if you want to get there. So some people don't want to get up that high and have all that stress or that responsibility or hassle. Yeah, it's up to you guys. But if you guys want to get there, I wish you the best to get there. So, so physical procurement is the same as any project with Agile. You know, you still need to reach out to the seller, negotiate with them, and then execute a contract. It might be just a purchase order. It might be something more elaborate, but it's essentially the same. So Agile contracts, you know, we need them to encourage that flexibility because the scope might expand, the scope might shrink, depending on what's being delivered, that value. Oh, and since our schedule says that we're going to be doing chapter 5 next week, I've kind of picked a spot in the middle that hopefully makes sense to stop at. We'll see when we get there, but it's only about 16 slides in of this one. So probably be an early night again for you guys. So I don't hear any complaints, which is a good thing. So, all right. So you guys are just like my students that when I'm done for the day, I don't twiddle my thumb and have them sit there for the rest of the class period. I'm like, we're done, go away. And the first time I do it, they're like, what? The second time I do it, they disappear like in a puff of smoke is behind them. Kind of like those Roadrunner cartoons. But all right, so we need to look at, you know, when we're looking at these contracts, most of the time, because of the nature of these contracts, we usually share the risks and we share the rewards too, because we're trying to innovate something. You know, there might be something in that contract where that intellectual property that we develop is shared between our customer and ourselves. Which means that if that developed process gets licensed, there might be some royalties that come to our company plus our customer. So there's a lot of risk, but there's, I would say, equally just as much reward, if not more. A master services agreement plus addenda or, you know, additions onto that contract or agreement. You know, these are, they're kind of like generic. They're kind of like a blanket contract. I don't know if you guys have ever ran into one of these. If you're in a labor union, you have like your master labor agreement. So this is kind of the same thing. This is just, you know, a contract for services here. The terms of the MSA or this master services agreement don't change, but that's what the addenda is for. The addenda are the additional terms that are added or terms that change terms in the master agreement. So, so this only needs the master services agreement only needs to be renegotiated every so often. It's the addenda that you create as the contract's going on that, so you only have to negotiate 1 or 2 items at a time instead of a whole agreement. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. Does that? Okay. Joseph gets it mostly, it looks like. Sarah, how about you? Okay, makes sense. Okay, how about you, Derek? All right, got a heart, so we're doing good there. Okay. So looking at the payment terms, we might do it on milestones. Might be on each iteration. Maybe there's a payment. Maybe it's a monthly payment, or payment for the services that are provided. So we want to skip or not even do those arbitrary milestones. We don't want to say, well, when we're 50% of the project, we'll settle up and pay anything that's owed. Well, that might be arbitrary, because if your scope increases, that 50% milestone has just ran away. It moved further away. So your contract, if you're using milestones or payment terms, you want to base that on the value that's being delivered. So that incremental value. That way you can reestablish what these milestones are, or the payment terms are. So now we can also have the fixed price or micro deliverables. So we can have a flat charge per story, or the product owner controls when maybe a payment should be made. And then this also helps, like if there's something expensive, it can be transparent and stopped early in case like it's going over budget for the client. It would be, I don't want to say a waste of effort, but if you guys create something through the agile process and then the customer can't afford to keep going because you made something so costly, now the customer might not have a fully functional whatever it was you guys are doing. Where if it's a flat fee, fixed price, you guys might only charge a certain rate per story, per iteration, per month, whatever it is. Now the customer knows how to budget to pay for these services. And pay per use. So the money shows what's in demand. You could have like, for example, a software development tool called Unreal. You can get the free version of the software, and Unreal is the basis for making a lot of the applications for the phones. Also some games too. If you get the free version of the software and develop your stuff, and it's actually in the contract of the free version where they get 15% of revenue based on that game. So like those in-application purchases that you might see, they would get 15% of that. Where if you pay for a license of Unreal, they don't get any of it because you paid for a full license. Could be something like that.
Yeah, how much is that license though?
I think it's like $40 a month or something. And it's not that expensive, but it's, if you're doing, you can't flip over when you're in the middle. Like you can't go the free version and then switch to the paid version when you're almost done developing it. It's so you can't try to trick the system. But that's just one example. There might be something where, like for example, Google Maps. If you have a application that will search Google Maps, that Google will charge a fee per every, I don't want to say transaction, but every usage of using their API. So, for example, if you're using Yelp and you want to see the location of the restaurant that you're going to, well, if you hit that address and it takes you to Google Maps, Yelp is paying a fraction of a penny for every time that's done. So that's how Google gets a little bit of money, because it's not somebody sitting at a computer on Google Maps or in Google doing it. It's an outside application that's putting more demand on the Google Maps servers. So it's kind of helping compensate Google for the use of that. There was a period of time where Apple Maps was actually using Google Maps and just putting the Apple branding on it. So, but anyway, so there could be a pay per use put into a contract. But you got to remember that the biggest thing is flexibility in the contract for Agile. Because of how the nature of Agile, we need that flexibility. So now we need a plan for that procurement. So for this, we need our project charter, our business documents. So what is our business case? How do we deal with the benefits management plan? Then we need our project management plan. So we need the scope management plan, the quality management plan, resource management plan, and the scope baseline. Project documents, we're going to need the milestone list, project team assignments, requirements documentation, requirements traceability matrix, resource requirements, risk register, and shareholder register. And our enterprise environmental factors, and our organizational process assets. So once again, we're going to use our experts' judgments in our tools and techniques. I'm going to do some data gathering, so market research. This could be firming up prices on whatever the resource is going to cost. So maybe there's a better time of year to get that resource. For example, if you're renting office space, the best time to get office space might be January. Might be that time of year instead of the summer or whatnot. I'm not sure. I've never had to procure office space, but a data analysis, is it better to make the item or is it better to buy the item or outsource it? There's trade-offs on each. So that make or buy decision really comes down to, is your company capable of doing it? And if it's not, or you can't do it well enough to get the quality you need, then outsourcing or the buy option might be your best bet if you can't add to your capability in your own company. So source selection analysis. So which is your better source of supply for the resources you need? And then our meetings. And to be honest, procurement meetings can be extremely boring. It's a lot of numbers, a lot of just boring information, to be honest. So our outputs, we're going to have our procurement management plan, our procurement strategy. I'm going to have some bid documents. So we might have to put things out for bid. Procurement statement of work. Source selection criteria. How are we going to pick our source of supply? The make or buy decisions from our analysis. Independent cost estimates. Change requests. So we're going to have some project documents updates also. So we might be updating our lessons learned register, our milestone list, requirements documentation, requirements traceability matrix, risk register, and stakeholder register. And due to all this, we might have some organizational process assets updated, that we need to update. So yeah, plan procurement management. You guys good on this? So procurement is not something that a lot of people have, overwhelming experience in. So, but it all makes sense when you look at what you guys do and then put it into the procurement mindset, and it makes a lot more sense. But that takes about 16 weeks to cover in my courses. So contracts, we have 3 things that are needed for a contract. We need an offer. So we have some company or supplier making an offer to the buyer for a service, a product, or whatever it is. And then we need the buyer to offer an acceptance. So it has to be voluntary. You might hear it as arm's length negotiation. And that person who does the acceptance must be authorized to do the acceptance on behalf of the buyer, usually called a buyer's agent. Different companies call these people different things. For the federal government, it was a warranted contracting officer, meaning they had a procurement warrant. Basically, it was a federal document saying that they could obligate the United States of America to pay certain things. It's probably goes back to the founding of the country on that warrant, but it's still used. And then the final thing we need to make a contract is that exchange of consideration. Could be money, could be an item of value. So it needs to have that. So if we think about, a house, as a buyer, they would put in an offer. The seller would accept that offer or put a counter offer in. So there'd be an acceptance after some negotiation if you were buying a house. Then you would be exchanging a house for X number of dollars, or what the consideration is. So I'm making an assumption that you guys have negotiated like maybe a house or a car, but something like that is pretty common. Make sense to you guys? All right. So we have several types of contracts, and I don't like the acronyms that they use, but we have fixed price contracts. And this is probably one of the most common ones if you're procuring resources, is a firm fixed price. For example, you go to Walmart, you're paying what's the price tag that's on the shelf for that item. It's firm. It's a fixed price, right? You really can't negotiate with Walmart, right? I mean, you can try, but they'll probably laugh you out of the store. But that's the price you're going to pay. If you go to a car dealership, to their service department, their prices are fixed and they're firm on those prices. Now the sales manager might be willing to do something, but they're pretty fixed in their prices. But then we have this other one here, a fixed price incentive fee. This one's a little different. So we have our fixed price, but then we have an incentive at the end that, and if I'm remembering what the book says, and I'm trying to put it into different terms. If you have a contract with, say, build a house, you can put in the contract that if they don't deliver the keys by the contracted date, that they have to pay you a fee per day. Well, that gives the builder an incentive to get everything done to hand you the keys on a certain day. But you could also put in there that the builder will get a bonus if they finish ahead of schedule. So it could be $100 a day if for every day they're ahead of schedule and deliver the house. And you might want to put in there, when a certificate of occupancy is issued, because that's usually what the county or city needs to give before you can actually live there legally. It basically means that they've done all their inspections and it's good. That's a very common thing. It's like a performance incentive on a contract. And like I said, double check with your book, but make sure I didn't go off the rails on that one. So fixed price with an economic price adjustment. So this one here is pretty common when, for example, leasing commercial space, or let's just go with leasing commercial space as an example. You can lease a storefront, let's say $1,000 a month, but they have written into the contract that that price is going to go up 3% a year or whatever the cost of living increase is. They can put that in there because that will essentially protect the owner of that property that you're leasing from their property losing value over time because the dollar actually loses value every year. So they can kind of fight that by having these economic price adjustments. Does that make sense? How about you, Sarah? Is it sort of? I'm trying to think of another way to explain it. All right. I appreciate that, Derek, the thumbs up. Like, for example, you guys might get a cost of living increase every year. So they're basically trying to keep your salary or your wage in line to be the same over time because, items are getting more expensive because of, inflation. So it might also be called like an inflation adjustment. Have you ever heard of that, Sarah? Inflation adjustment? Same thing. Most contracts will have some provision that does not allow it to go down. It only can go up. Another example might be these the adjustable rate mortgages. So you might have a 5-year ARM adjustable rate mortgage. And after 5 years, it's usually every year after that or every so many years after that, the rate can adjust. And there's usually a maximum it can adjust and a minimum it can adjust, usually only in the upward direction. Does that help, Sarah? All right, cool. I knew I'd get it. So, okay. So cost reimbursable. So you can think of this one as you're reimbursing for the work. So we have a cost plus a fixed fee. So you can think of maybe a contractor you might have come to your house. They're going to charge you the cost of materials plus a labor rate, right? Or a mechanic might charge you the cost of parts plus the labor to fix your car. Just like that. That's cost plus fixed fee. Now, cost plus incentive fee is just like a fixed price incentive fee. So you have the cost of whatever it is, but there's that bonus or a penalty associated with the service or product that's being negotiated here or under contract. So, and then we have a cost plus award fee. So there might be a more extensive bonus or a quality award. Now, many big manufacturers do have a quality like bonus. Like if they meet a quality standard, like for example, John Deere does this. They pay for the materials, but as long as a certain percentage of them meets the minimum standard of the quality, they could get an extra payment on top of it. So that encourages their manufacturers to produce to the specifications, make sure all the products are to the specifications so they can get that bonus or that award. Does that make sense? All right, cool. Time and material. This one is pretty simple. I mean, it's kind of like the cost plus fixed fee. But it's, this one could be like your car mechanic or contractor, where the cost plus fixed fee might be the materials plus $200. So I mixed that one up earlier, but yeah, fixed fee is a flat fee plus whatever they spend on the materials or the cost, I should say. Time and materials, kind of that's the mechanics, that's your general contractors, or doing a repair to your house, that kind of thing. So do these contracts make sense overall? Feel confident enough to talk about them? Maybe not that confident. That's all right. like I said, it takes me 16 weeks to teach this to my students, which you guys are getting in what? We've only been talking for a few minutes. So, all right. Oh, is this going to go on? Okay. So I just basically talked about all this. All right. Firm fixed price contract. Yeah. So this, like I said, this one's the most common type. The cost is the cost, and it's usually set in the beginning. Cost increase are responsibility of the seller. So, yeah, because the price has already been fixed and agreed to in the contract. The only option your seller might have is to terminate the contract under whatever terms are in the contract. But if they do that, they might lose future business from your company. So it's a dangerous game for them to decide to terminate a contract. But it might be more profitable to cancel the contract. Like, for example, lumber prices were extremely high recently, right? You guys heard about all that? How
They still are.
Yeah, I heard they're coming down, but their furniture is starting to see that lumber price increase now. But yeah, lumber has gone up, like doubled or even tripled in price for a piece of lumber. Well, that would be on the seller or say a builder if you've already had a contract saying, this is the price that I'm willing to pay for you to build this home. Well, the builder then has to absorb the cost increase from the lumber because the contract's there. The only thing they can do is cancel the contract, but there might be a penalty for them canceling the contract. So that's kind of like a real world example that you guys might, be able to see from the recent news here. Fixed price incentive fee. So financial incentives for the seller to get the work done faster, cheaper or improved technical performance. Final contract price not determined until the completion of the work. Yeah, it's going to be a minimum. So there's a fixed price. So there's a minimum. It's just, do you pay anything on top of that incentive? You'll determine how much extra is paid upon the completion of all the work. So, yeah, best for projects with important and difficult to achieve constraints. Yeah. Okay, points of total assumption. All right. All right, so there's point in a contract where the seller assumes responsibility for all cost overruns. So this one, I haven't done too many of these. Usually the cost overruns are in the contracts I've done are shared between the seller and the buyer. But, target cost plus your ceiling price, so your maximum price minus your target price, divided by the buyer's share ratio. Yeah, so if you as the buyer, if you're going to be share the cost overruns 50-50 with your seller, yeah. This makes sense? See you guys? I'm just running this through my head and it makes sense to me, but I know this is new to you guys. Okay. I have no head shaking yes. So your ceiling price is your maximum price you're willing to pay. And then you have your target price. So target price is essentially the same as your target cost. Or, wait, let me rephrase that. No, your seller's cost, I'm sorry, is the target cost because they want to make some money, right? So they're going to have their cost of what it costs them to make, and then they're going to have that target price of what they want to sell it for, right? So your ceiling price, that's what your buyer's maximum willing to pay. And then your buyer's share ratio. So if it's 50%, your buyer is willing to pay 50% of whatever their maximum price is for that they're willing to pay for. and the target price. So if the item's target price was $50, but your buyer was willing to pay $100, but they're only willing to pay 50% of any overruns. So your buyer's willing to pay $25 of the ceiling price of 100 to the target price of 50. They're only willing to pay 50% of that $50. So that'd be $25. So the point of total assumption would be total cost, whatever that is, plus the $25. Okay. No facial expression changes. All right. How are you guys doing? Okay. Joseph seems okay. Sarah's giving an okay. Derek, how about you? All right. You're good? All right. Okay. Yeah. So at what point will the seller have to start paying 100% of any overages? This is one way to look at it. And this is stuff you can negotiate in your contract. The buyer's share ratio, you can put that in your contracts. So fixed price with economic price adjustment. So good for long running contracts. When you're questioning the economic conditions, for example, when gas prices went up to $5-6, you guys remember that a couple of years ago? Well, there was a lot of companies that locked a lot of, let's say UPS would lock into a contract with a fuel supplier for several years. Well, that contract would have an economic price adjustment. And when gas prices skyrocketed, UPS wasn't on the hook for the skyrocketing price, but they were paying more based on the contract because of that economic price adjustment. There usually is a cap to how high that adjustment can go. It might be, like I was talking about the mortgages. If you have a 5-year adjustable mortgage, after 5 years, your mortgage rate might change every year, but it can only go up let's say 1% each year to a maximum of another 5%. So that kind of stuff can be put into other contracts. So UPS might have paid $3 a gallon, but their adjustments might have only allowed for a 5% increase. So they would be paying $3.15 when gas was actually $6 a gallon or $5 a gallon at the pumps. So UPS, because they had a long-term contract, made out really well. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so the economic price adjustment is what can change that fixed price over time. So, and inflation is one factor that can be done, can be considered. But if you do put that into a contract, make sure that you identify the master data. So like, is it the Federal Reserve's inflation metric, whatever that is, actually specify what is going to be used as the data for the adjustments, instead of somebody saying, well, we want to raise it 5% because we want to do that. Well, if you have a metric to use that's external, then that is actually, you can take that to court and say, well, yeah, this is how it's supposed to adjust if you need to go to court. Cost plus fixed fee. Buyer reimburses the seller for the seller's allowable cost plus a fixed percentage of profit. So, the fee does not change due to the seller's performance. So, and used when costs cannot be accurately estimated in advance, but buyer has adequate controls on costs. Yeah. So based on this, you can factor what the maximum cost will be for a contract, because it's whatever the cost is. Well, the cost is really the only adjustable factor here. and then, fixed fee on top of that. But if the fixed fee is a percent, then that might be adjustable. But you can do the math and figure out what the total cost for this will be. So cost plus incentive fee contract. Like I mentioned, there's essentially a bonus or a penalty assigned to the performance. And that fee or incentive is based on a negotiated formula. Could be days before a deadline, days after a deadline. And the seller, it gives them an incentive to get the job done sooner. And it could be a penalty. It can motivate them to get the job done, regardless if it's done early or done late. Cost plus award. So reimbursing for all the cost, plus there's a bonus at the end, or the award, tied to that performance. So it's subjective. The buyer judges the seller's performance. Like I mentioned, John Deere, they're using a quality standard. So if the supplier meets that quality standard, they'll get a bonus of X, whatever the standard is, or the award is. So you need to have procedures in place to make sure this is decided fairly. And it's an award, not a penalty. The penalty might be you don't use them in the future. So, or you negotiate harder to get a lower cost because you know they're going to have X number that are going to be poor quality. So, time and cost, or time and materials. You're paying for the time and you're paying for the materials. You guys were familiar with this. So this could include other contract types inside it. But it's a time and material contract that it overall. So the big thing here is when you don't have an exact statement of work, you don't have a detailed description of what you need done. So that's really the big deciding factor on here. Time and materials might be good for an agile project because of the scope changing. And so you can see the difference here. The seller's risk is opposite of the buyer's risk. And they use the acronyms here, but you can see where they fall. Time and the materials is right in the middle. It's equal risk for the seller and the buyer. Where the cost plus fixed fee is high for the buyer's risk, but low for the seller. They're going to get reimbursed all their cost, but the fixed fee, can vary. Or it won't vary, but they're getting all their money back as a seller. But it's higher on the buyer's risk because the cost part. So that's as far as I wanted to get today. So, what do you guys have any questions or anything? I know I'm kind of, procurement's my thing, so that's why I know this really well. It's just usually I kind of wade my students into this idea or the contract slowly. You guys just kind of got pushed into the deep end, unfortunately. But you guys should be able to think of these and maybe come up with some on your own that you've done. So, but all right, what do you guys think? You guys good? Need